How much comprehensible input do you actually need to learn a foreign language? Can you learn a foreign language with comprehensible input alone? Let's answer these questions. And we'll answer them with numbers. All right. These are some stats. These are the approximate amount of words of input that you need, total amount of words of input that you need to acquire a specific amount of words. So if your vocabulary, and I know there's passive vocabulary and active vocabulary and all of that, but uh, if you learn through input, most of what you learn will be passive anyway. But this is the main problem with input. You can see that if you learn with input alone, if you're decent at maths, you'll notice that after a few thousand words, the word frequency drops drastically. What does this mean? Well, this is the Pareto principle working against you. The most common words, the most common 500 words, 1000 words, are really common. And if you learn them, you'll understand 50%, 60%, 80% of a text or whatever kind of input you get in. And you will learn them relatively early because they show up all the time. The problem is that after that, frequency drops and it keeps dropping. So after needing only a couple 100,000 words, which is already quite a lot, by the way, that's a book or two, to learn just 1,000 words, the most common 1,000 words, which will be really useful. Then you need a little more than that. You will not need a couple 100,000 more to learn another 1,000 words. You need 300,000 more. These are approximate numbers, by the way. And then to learn another 1,000 words, an extra 1,000 words, you'll need, guess what? You need to double the amount of input you've done. So you need the exact same amount of input to go from 2,000 words known to 3,000 words known that you needed in total to get to 2,000 words. And then to get from 3,000 to 4,000, you need to again almost double the amount of words you know. And it only keeps getting worse. So by the time you get to 10,000 words, which is more or less what you need to be fluent or relatively fluent in a language, you need an insane amount of input, 12 million words. And okay, it could be 10 million words. It really depends on the person, right? Uh, it's not only about input. Also depends on your cognitive ability and how good your memory retention is. Some people just see one word in context and they remember it. Some other people need massive amounts of reviewing same words over and over. But for the most part, these numbers are based on the assumption that you need between 10 and 20 reviews per word. So you need to see each word in context between 10 and 20 times. That's the average for most people. Again, if you're really smart, you need fewer. Like if you're mentally really, if you have a really high IQ and you have really good memory, or you've trained your memory. If you're not all that smart, maybe you need a lot more. Or if you don't pay attention, maybe. But you can see that 10,000 words is more or less what fluency is. That would be around B2-ish, C1-ish maybe. And that's 12 million words. 10, 12 million words. A proficient level would be 20,000 words, which is double that, and that's already an insane amount of words that you need to get exposed to. 50 million words of input, that's hundreds of books that you need to read, or many thousands of hours watching videos or listening to podcasts. And 40,000 would be more or less a native level speaker. In terms of vocab, again, this we're talking vocab only. We're not talking about language production skills, which you don't work that much with input or at all. Again, you need specific work on your speaking as well. But we're talking vocabulary. So a native level vocabulary would be 40,000 approximately. Also, it depends on the level of education of the native speaker, of course. But yeah, these are just approximate numbers for you to have an idea of what we are dealing with. So 5,000 would be like intermediate speaker, conversational. 1,000 ish would be beginner. If you're really extroverted and you, again, your vocab is not all that important when it comes to speaking, right? You could know just a couple of thousand words, but if you know all the right words and you memorized, like all those words come from language islands you memorized, then you will probably be more fluent. Not probably, definitely be more fluent than someone who knows 20,000 words just through reading, but doesn't speak much, doesn't get any speaking practice. Then with 1,000, 2,000 words, you'll be more fluent if you mostly learn those through speaking practice. Again, we're talking hypothetical hypothetical scenarios here where you only learn those words through input, right? So you can see that intermediate level you need like over a million words, a couple million words, and fluent, to become fluent, truly fluent, you need an insane amount, like double digit amount of the double digit million amount of total input. So this is what we're dealing with. This is what you'll have to go through if you want to become fluent in a foreign language. Again, if English is not your native language and you want to get really good at English, you can and probably should go through this. Just get used, because English is the global language and it's really useful. Or if you move into the country and you plan on living in the country permanently, okay, whatever, you move into Germany or you move into Latin America, yeah, you should get this amount of like hundreds of millions of words of input eventually. Like, this would take decades, but for most people, this is not realistic. This is not possible. This is just not. You don't have the time for that for our life, and you don't want to spend the next decade or two spending 5 hours a day getting input. So this is why I came up with the language, the sentence lists that have basically all the vocabulary that you need concentrated there in a few thousand sentences, so less than 100,000 words in total. And then by focusing on that list and reviewing the list over and over, and so it'd be what, a million, it'd be like a million words of input in total, million and a half, and you'd learn 10 to 20,000 words by focusing, by getting exposed to those 10 to 20,000 words, but 10 to 20 times each, and it'd be a million or two of exposure instead of 20, 30, 50 million words of reading or listening. Again, if you have the time and you want to live in the country and all that, yeah, go for it. Eventually, you want to get there, but especially in the beginning, because again, this needs to be comprehensible input as well. Not all input is comprehensible, and if you just listen to Japanese, like you just have it in the background, like those guys, the math versus Japan, those guys are just the more input the better, even if you don't understand it. No, it's just noise. So if you're doing that again, does it really count? Not really. This is for comprehensible input. So I highly recommend learning the most common 5, 10,000 words through focus, concentrated work, like lots of repetition, same sentences over and over, and then jump to real content, enjoyable content. It'll be much easier to understand, much more enjoyable. Otherwise, you're just listening to it that you don't understand, or you try to read, but if you don't understand like 7 words out of 10, it'll be painfully slow and you will not make any progress. Uh, so that's why I highly recommend using, first of all, mnemonics. So you memorize 30, 50, 100, whatever amount of words every day. So you keep, begin again, go in this order. Start with the most common ones and then slowly learn less and less common ones. And use language, not islands, also islands, but that's for speaking. Use word families so that those 10, 20, 40,000 words you want to learn build up truly massive vocabulary instead of having to be exposed to each one of those words 20 times in context through millions of words of input. If you learn them in groups of related words, I don't know, interested, not a good example. I don't know, can't come up with anything now. Okay, possible, impossible. Yeah, English doesn't have that many of those, right? Or maybe I'm just going for weird words. Uh, I don't know. I mean, there are lots. If you go on the list, if you go take a look at the list, like the Russian one, the German one, Spanish one, you'll see there's like 10, 20 words of the same. Some words don't have that many words that are similar, but for the most part, if you do this, you'll come up with lists of words that are related. And if you learn a word and then 5 to 10 words that are similar, you can very quickly expand your vocab instead of just having to see all of them in context. Usually, these words tend to be like adding there or im or words that are like just changing something. You turn a verb into a noun or into into a word that means exactly the opposite, like possible and impossible. Yeah, I was thinking more in Spanish because it's like posible, imposible, posibilitar. Uh, it's much more of that. English is maybe not the language in which you get more of those. Languages with more declension and more conjugations, you get a lot more word families, and therefore it's easier to learn this way. So, again, this is what I suggest you do: use mnemonics, use lists, because otherwise, this is what you're in here for, and this is only vocabulary. Then you have to learn to speak as well through a lot of practice. As you can't learn to, it doesn't matter if you know 40,000 words. If you never practice your speaking, you'll really, really struggle to speak when you have to talk in front of people and you haven't spoken in months, right? So, just food for thought. Yes, get as much input as possible, but you should also do a bunch of other stuff that makes that input more comprehensible and faster and more enjoyable.